Good afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Shabbat. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. As we just spoke about, it's the last fast of the month of Ramadan, so I am, bittersweet. Looking forward to going back to morning teas and coffees, which haven't been able to be consumed, but also quite sad because of just the spiritual upliftment and the sense of community that you get during this period. But we following on from the episode on the Mexican fisherman.
Yes.
And I hope people enjoyed that. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts and reflections on our take or our takeaways from the Mexican fisherman. But this week, we wanted to explore the idea of, can you actually make money from following your life path?
Yeah. So, just brief context. This is, I think, number 4, maybe number 5 in our series looking at work, because we've done a lot about money and work is integral to that question about money. The first one, from memory, we looked at how deeply in our psychology the idea of work as some sort of suffering or inconvenience, and you get your money in return. You get its compensation in return for your suffering. And that's the model many of us, consciously or otherwise, are stuck in. Then we looked at the idea of following your life path and these teachings of follow your bliss, follow your individuation, move in the direction of your soul, and different ways that could become clear. And then we did the Mexican fisherman. Is that right?
The hustle culture.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Then we talked about hustle culture, which is a very strong kind of motif for, push, 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 money, 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 grow, 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 numbers, numbers, numbers. And then we talked about the Mexican fisherman story, which is this idea more like the life path. Well, if you've already got what you want, do you actually need to hustle and grow and get lots of money? So hopefully people who've listened to the last 4, I hope we've given lots of different angles and food for thought. And, obviously our intention is to get you listeners to reflect on your choices and what you're doing, and also maybe your own assumptions if you think that certain things aren't possible. But then today there's the question, which is, can I actually, how are we going to say it, get money, earn a living, very problematic phrase, following the life path?
Yeah.
So must it be, if you and I are saying, well, it doesn't all have to be suffering and inconvenience and hustle, maybe people say, well, how does it work? And maybe they don't want to be a Mexican fisherman just sort of chilling with very little on a beach. So how does that work?
Yeah.
Over to you.
I mean, for me, when we were just discussing this, it was like I could just feel maybe a voice inside of me, or there being a bit of a judgment around, yeah, well, that's just too good to be true, Tim. It's really nice that you guys talk about this. That phrase keeps coming back. I need to earn a bloody living, Tim, and you're telling me that I need to follow my life. Is following my life path going to pay the bills?
That's a good question.
And so I guess that opens up this whole idea of what are we really trying to do with this pursuit of the life path? Because we've got to be realistic. You can follow your life path and it might not bring you anything. And that's going to cause, maybe some suffering, or maybe not.
Yeah, well, let me just pause you there. Yeah, because of course, when we don't follow our life paths, we're not suffering at all, are we?
Well, there is that to throw into the mix.
When I don't do the things I really want, and I don't make time for the things that bring me alive, and I consistently for decades deny myself, whether it's work or pleasure or fun or interest, I don't do that because I think I'm being realistic. Aren't I already suffering?
You kind of are. So I'm thinking, like, this pursuit of the life path, is it a case of, well, you can follow your life path and it just be something that doesn't involve money, but you could follow your life path and incorporate earning money on your life path. It's like, it could be either or. It's not a case of your life path has to be something that then is your work and your job.
No, that's right. That's right. So maybe let's start there. But I want to come back to some of these words. I mean, I like your judgmental voice in there. There's something about who's realistic and who's responsible and who's sensible and how it all works. And even as I say it, you can hear in my tone, I've got a slightly kind of critical parent voice, as if I know right, Shabba, and you shouldn't want too much, and da 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 da. It's very good to notice that voice as an internal voice. Maybe we'll come back to it. because it seems to carry a weight. And the main thing about that voice is not that it's really telling you the truth about reality. It's that it thinks it is, and it has a feeling of confidence. And maybe the part of us that kind of dreams we could be doing something different, and maybe that lacks confidence. So I think there's something about that. That there's this whole thing about who's realistic, but yeah, we need to get realistic about what reality is, right?
Mm.
And just because someone says, I'm thinking of certain political figures at the moment who speak as if they know what they're talking about, but just because a voice, whether it's a president or an inner voice, says it knows what it's talking about and sounds like it's confidence, that actually has no bearing at all on whether it's real.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the Harvard MBA from last week.
Right.
Yeah, like we
Well,
sort of,
the difference was that the Harvard MBA from last week, and if you don't know what we're talking about, please listen to it. I think that's different because they did know what they were talking about and they were skilled and expert in a particular logic. So I don't have a problem with the Harvard MBA telling the Mexican fisherman to do stuff. It's just it wasn't very helpful. But I think they had a view of the world that was partially true. But I think when we're telling ourselves about what's realistic or not, we need to investigate where that's actually coming from. But I digress. Your question was, we maybe come back to this. Your question was, does a life path need to be your job or where you get money from? Sort of yes and no. I'll put it this way. The whole question of, well, what is my life path? And we could do a whole series on that. Okay. And I don't want people to feel heavy or pressured. Like, oh, I should know, I should have some big calling. Your life path can be as simple as, if it weren't for money, we talked about this in episode 2, of this series. Your life path can be as simple as, if you know you never had to worry about money again in your life, what is it you would do more of? Or what is it you would be doing more of now or commit to more fully or stop procrastinating if you weren't telling yourselves you had to be realistic and get money? Now, for some people, that is a whole step out of the work they do. It might be a whole thing that, I don't know, is writing a novel work, is becoming doing charity work. So for some people, there is a vision of something they want to do or create or become that could absolutely sit in a bucket of, yeah, that's a job or that's a career or vocation, and they don't do it. So for some people, the life path step absolutely is that. For others, it might not be. They might feel, well, there isn't some big thing I want to do, but if I wasn't worrying about money, I would be more present for my children. I wouldn't feel stressed all the time. I would grow my garden. I might reconnect with my painting. I might study Arabic, whatever, right? It might be a number of things or one thing, or it might be, actually I would just get fitter. I would just work less and I'd really put more energy into my fitness and my spiritual, emotional well-being. So life path doesn't have to be a job, although it could be. But the point is this, what most of us do is we don't follow the life path because of the job, right? In other words, I say, well, I can't get fit and write my novel and grow my garden and be present to the kids because I'm spending all my bloody time suffering at work.
right. That's that feels like that's the big barrier or
Yeah.
block
Yeah.
to pursuing or even implementing anything that might resemble a move towards the life path, because you're just so drained, suffering,
Yeah.
etc.,
Exhausted.
exhausted. Yeah, and that is clearly happening for a lot of people.
It is. And then what we say is, and this is maybe the bit we could contest and explore today, then we say, and that's just reality. It
Yeah.
must be like that. There is no other option. Maybe for privileged rich people, there's another option. Or maybe if I won the lottery, there's another option. But there isn't for me, and that's realistic and sensible. And I think what we're exploring here is there's more space to explore and do something different than we think. But of course, as soon as we begin to take that seriously, we get scared and we say, I would not have money to pay my bills. I would end up under a bridge, etc. So we need to challenge that too. And actually, there's a couple of quotes. Maybe I'll try and dig them out and read them at the end of this podcast, because there's some wonderful sort of poems and verses of people who, it's often the poets and the artists in the world who encourage us to try and cut through this story and do what we're really here to do. So artists and poets are often great advocates of the life path. And interestingly enough, many artists don't seem to make much money. I did a whole article about why it's convenient for mainstream society to make sure that most artists stay poor. But I digress.
Okay.
That might be another podcast.
Yeah, that's immediately brought up, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
a few questions.
if society allowed artists to genuinely feel rich and wealthy by being artists, we'd all want to become artists. And so mainstream society needs many of us to suffer
And be worker bees.
and feel
Yeah.
stuck and not feel free, because a true artist, with and without money, experiences himself as free. And the artist position, and I mean a real artist, it's a friend of mine who's an artist and campaigner describe artist as kind of the most political role and the most dangerous to society,
Because
because
they
the true
challenge.
artist, yeah, they just refuse to be bound by what we say is realistic
Yeah.
or necessary. And I think if mainstream society allowed people like that to feel they were comfortable and flourishing, and there's no reason why they couldn't be, you could have a society that put money toward people like that because they do a great deal of good for all of us. But if it did, it would be supporting a story that mainstream society does not want, which is where we could all be free. We could all do something different. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So another way in answering your question, maybe a good way for some people to think about life path, not as this heavy thing, what's my mission, but almost
Yeah.
if I had an artistic spirit, and I don't mean paint, but just I went into the world in a more kind of open, creative, fluid way. If I followed my interest, if I wasn't bound by mainstream thinking, how would I spend my time? And that could be
Yeah.
many different directions.
And I like that. And that sits really well with me, from the life path being something almost feels quite stressful if you don't kind of know what your life path is, or what your calling is. It can feel quite burdensome. But like you said, it can just be small things. Attending to your garden, being more present with your kids. It doesn't have to be, anything big and grand. And
No, no.
I think those small things, and I often look at the small things, and the small things, quite often have very big shifts
Yes.
in the way you experience life. So
Well,
I think that's something I'm going to take with me, is that actually try and seize those smaller wins, and that gives me quite a bit of comfort, and hopefully to others listening. All right.
yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And also, I'm sure I've said this before on the podcast. For many of us, we're so stuck and ground down by the relentlessness of work, hustle, money culture, and the sense that we're quite stuck, but it has to be like this, that we get more and more out of touch with our life path. We get more and more out of touch with what actually brings me alive. So for many people I coach personally, they need to go through a period, like it's a gradual period. They need to go through a period where they maybe just really just rest, or like have a sabbatical. They just explore and remind themselves of what they love, or discover what they love, because so much of modern work culture grinds that out of us, and we comply because we think it has to be like that. So I would say many people they're not particularly conscious of, oh, I'd really love to be doing this. If they are, in a way, it's more painful in some sense, but they're more likely to move. But many of us are just in the situation of like, well, it just has to be like this. So what I would say to anyone listening is the best data for, well, what might be my life path, and you're right, it doesn't have to be big. It's simply this: what is it, or what are the things that when I'm actually doing them in the moment, I feel alive, right? It's not a conceptual thing, the life path. It's not necessarily a message from somewhere or a big, heavy thing. It's just like when I do it, I notice physiologically, it's like, ooh, I feel,
Yeah.
suddenly my shoulders go back and I can breathe and I'm a bit tingly. Whatever that is, it might be dreaming about your novel or some huge, big, easy project, or it might just be watching the bees and the frogs in your garden. But whatever that is, that is data. It's telling you something about your life and your path. And if I take one more step, I know we're going a little bit off piece, but the reason we don't notice those, or we don't pay attention to them, you see, again, we are trained in modern culture to pay attention to things that are easily measurable and countable. So I might focus on the number in my bank account, or the role, or my career review, performance review, because these get all turned into numbers and I can get a sense of more or less. Those are quantities. We're trained and hypnotized to focus on numbers. but the sort of internal feeling of, "Ooh, I just feel more relaxed," and a little uplift. It's very real, but it's not so easy to measure or pin down. It's an in the
Mm,
moment experience. We're sort of trained by education and society to not really regard those as important. So what's really valuable for anyone thinking about their life path is just notice those moments and then consider that those moments, if you wrote in your diary every time you had that little whatever it is, sitting quietly on your sofa, joining your community, doing some creative project, it could be in your work, but it might be a particular part of your work that you really love and other parts that really don't feel like that. Start noting them down and consider that that is valuable, relevant data, as valuable and as relevant about your life as any number, money number
mm.
or other number. Even that would be a super start. And then just think, well, I need to maximize that, not the things that are more easy to measure or count.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. There was just something when you were mentioning like the physiological change and how you feel.
Mm.
And I actually feel very alive when I play board games with my kids.
Right.
And I don't know whether that's because of the competitive spirit that's also
Mm.
there, but nonetheless, it's something that moves me into a different state
Mm.
of being. And I've never actually really recognized that I just genuinely love playing board games or card games with my family. That is a life path
Mm.
move as such. And to consciously say that I want to do more of this, or I
Mm.
would like it if we did more of that, I just wonder what kind of impact that would have on my life in general if I made a conscious decision
Mm.
of, I would like to do this. Can we all sit down and
Mm.
and play games together? I think that would change my mood. It would change the way I maybe go into work the next day, or maybe looking forward to finishing the day and going home because we've got that plan. Whereas normally you just don't, well, I certainly don't do those things with intention.
That's right. And I think it's a really good example. Those things get marginalized because of a whole story about what's important and what isn't and what you should be doing. And so those moments of delight or enjoyment get marginalized. They don't happen as much. And I want to suggest that there's often, this may or may not be the case for you, but there's often an inner and outer kind of meaning with those little moments. So, for example, the outer meaning is just you really like playing board games with your family. You should do more of it because you love it and it's fun and it brings you alive and you have that physiological thing. So that's the outer, the more obvious meaning. Do more of it. There may be, and we won't dive deep, an inner meaning, and it could be something like this because I've explored recently. I enjoy playing competitive chess, and I've been exploring again the outer form. I just like it; it's great. But there's an inner meaning, which is I get to concentrate very deeply. I'm totally not distracted. I can play for 3 hours and it's very competitive. So I've been thinking, how is that energy something that I need more of in my life, but I'm not getting or using in other areas? And you and I on this podcast have talked about sometimes our difficulties in marketing or, getting stuff out there and so I wonder if something about that playful competitive spirit and that desire to win is something that you can enjoy with your nearest and dearest, but actually that energy could also be part of your life path carrying you forward in other areas. Do you see what I mean? So there's the board games, but there's the way of being that the board games allow for you. That can also be part of someone's life path, right?
Yeah.
So I sometimes say to people, well, it's not about changing your job. Maybe say, I love my kids. I want to be more with my kids because I really love my kids and I really look after them and I'm dedicated to their development and I just feel so good as a mum or dad. So then the life path could be, okay, we need to spend more time doing that. But what would it be like to take that loving, nurturing way of being into your business, into your
Mm,
job? And then you get to be, maybe your life path is really to love people or nurture people or nourish people. So that's a more subtle response to the life path can be a doing, something that we do, but it can also be a way of being. That's a
mm,
whole other episode, probably. But maybe it's interesting for you to think, what are the energies you use when you're trying to beat your kids at whatever game it is, and you enjoy it and it feels safe and acceptable to do that. how might those energies help you with other things in the world you might try
Mm.
and do?
Yeah, the expression of competitive spirit.
Yeah.
Interesting one to think about. I know we were going to talk about the life path and our job or our
And money.
work and earning money. So should we turn our
Yeah.
attention to that for the sort of the remainder of
Yeah,
the
I think so.
podcast?
I think so. So the answer to the question, can I actually earn a living or get money from following my life path, is very simple. Yes and no, but you should do it anyway.
Okay.
And people who've listened to this podcast will have heard us use this phrase with and without money. So maybe I'll kind of give a summary and then you can jump in with questions or critiques or whatever. And we'll spend a bit of time looking at why it's yes and also why it's no, but that might not matter as much as you think. The first thing to notice is the number of people who just somehow have an idea that they couldn't be, or even worse, shouldn't be paid for what they really love. Right? I don't know if you can think of examples of this or you've met people, but for me, I see this often. So I see it often, for example, with people who are doing healing work, therapy work, spiritual work, what I would broadly call new paradigm work. People who are really following their path and their path is in some way unconventional and trying to, in some way, make society better. They often have this weird idea that even though they're doing it, they must stay under-resourced and badly paid for it. A bit like the artist. Right? It's not conscious. And in there somewhere, to me, is a couple of ideas, which I think people should just try and let go of. The first is kind of somehow it's like bad. It's almost tied up with the money is bad belief. We've talked about this in many podcasts, right? So if I'm doing something that's about changing society or making something different in society, or I'm not following the conventional way, often people have an unconscious idea that money and big business and commerciality and competition is bad and naughty and part of the problem. My life path is to make that better. I'm a healer or a campaigner or a spiritual person. If you're not careful, you then follow your life path with an unconscious idea money is bad. And guess what? You find it hard to charge what you should, or you forget
Mm.
to invoice, or money doesn't come. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that playing out.
There are lots and lots of people like that. So doesn't mean there's a guarantee you will have lots of money following your life path, but at least we can do the work to get over ourselves, get over the obstacle. So for anyone listening to this who's maybe on that path, just notice, if you're honest with yourself, do you undercharge? Do you feel scared or a bit heavy about the idea of really asking for the money you need for doing what you do? And partly it's because they think it's bad. And then there's this sort of version of that, which is almost asking for money will somehow contaminate or sully this beautiful thing that I do.
Mm.
I suffer from that in some areas. When the closer my work gets to my real heart practices, my kind of Buddhist practice, the more edgy I get about asking for
Okay.
money.
So whereas sort of like business coaching, life coaching, you would charge for and you wouldn't feel that, if it was more around sharing and charging for your spiritual practices or guidance in that area, there would be more of an edge.
It becomes more edgy. I mean, it's all been a bit edgy because I'm a good example of someone that I've just described, although I've done a lot of work on it. So I do charge. But yeah, another example might be the artist who will charge for doing illustration or graphic design. But when they do their own creations, where they put all of their genius and love in, and I've worked with artists like this, they literally cannot sell their art. I
Interesting.
worked with an artist who described to me, an amazing woman, amazing artist, amazing story. She finally exhibited her art, right? And some art critic came to the exhibition and said, that's amazing. How much do you charge? I'd like to buy it. And she literally kind of walked off. She just went numb and just couldn't do it. So that's an example. So again, we don't want to spend too long on this point. The more, in a way, idealistic or heartfelt your work is to you, there is a danger, but it's unnecessary, of either undervaluing it, thinking it's bad to get money, or thinking in some way the more money you get, you will sully or corrupt your work. And all I'll say for now is none of that is true, as we know. Let me pause because I've said a lot. Does this kind of pattern
I think that,
make
I mean, I think this goes back to the roots of how the problem of money sort of kicked off, which was the patterns that we sort of play out. And those of us that, are projecting onto money all of the positive qualities that we're looking to acquire, and and then we get the grabbing, and then there are those of us that, project all of these negative qualities and traits onto money, and
Right.
tend to then push money away. And what you were describing was that archetype of
Pushing.
the pushing away. So that made
Absolutely.
sense.
And the pushing can become stronger the closer we get to our life path. That's the
Right.
thing. So, for example, yeah, I don't mind. I'll take money if I'm an artist for doing agency graphic design work because I don't really believe in it and don't care about it.
Yeah.
And that's all wrapped up with the ideas we've explored. I'm suffering when I do that. I'm not doing my stuff. So I'll take
Yeah.
money because I'm suffering. But when I'm really doing what I love, I shouldn't
Uh,
or mustn't or can't take money. So get over that one. So that's one example of yes. If you get over that, money can come. I asked my meditation teacher once, because I've been exploring for a long time, how do I share some of my spiritual learnings in a work context? And it does feel edgy for me. And in the Buddhist context, it's usually given away for free. And there's a whole edgy thing around it that I'm still working with. I asked my meditation teacher, who is a man I greatly respect, and he didn't really charge for what he did. I mean, you had to pay, but he didn't exactly make money from it. But I asked him once, I'm starting to take this into organizations and run retreats. And, I don't know about money. How should I deal with it? And he just looked at me and he said, you should charge a lot. And he didn't charge a lot. He didn't. And I was like really gobsmacked. But he had a very good way of saying the thing that would kind of disturb you. What he said was, well, the Dharma is a very precious thing. It's the most precious thing we have. You could say spiritual teachings or teachings that really help people so it's the most precious thing. And in this society, people value what they pay a lot of money for. So you should charge them a lot of money so they value it. I'm
yeah.
still figuring that one out, but it was an
Uh,
interesting instruction.
yeah. We have similar debates within our circles about
Mm,
the speakers or the, what would you call them, lecturers that come to the mosques to recite. And there was always this idea that you didn't charge, but you were given
yeah,
a gift. Okay. So you don't stipulate, but it's kind of like understood that the going rate for the gift is
yeah,
so much.
it's interesting.
But then there were a few sort of younger individuals that were coming through the ranks, maybe not as knowledgeable, but certainly have a following because of social media and stuff, and talk the language of the youth, and are very popular. And suddenly they're coming and saying, well, actually, to speak at the mosque, we want X amount because we're valuable when we're helping the community move forward. And what we're doing is kind of priceless
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
guidance. And so there was this real kind of like battle between the traditional, no, we take what we're given because we're servants of God and we're doing that. And then there were, listen, like this is the most important job on the planet. So if you want good stuff and you want people to come well prepared, you pay good money, kind of thing.
I think it's a really
It's
interesting
such an
debate.
interesting, yeah.
And again, we could do a whole podcast, and maybe we will on that. But I think that has a confidence, and what it seems to me is it has an attitude of it is not corrupting me or diminishing what I'm doing by being confident to
Yeah.
ask for money. So I'm conscious of our time. So let me go through one other reason why it's yes, and then we'll
Okay.
touch on a couple why it's no,
Yeah.
and we'll end with it doesn't matter. You should do it anyway.
Go for it.
So the first yes is, free yourself up to be like those young lecturers visiting the mosque and be confident. Because if you believe what you're doing is precious, it is. The second thing is that when you're on your life path, when you're doing your thing that's you're passionate about, as I said earlier, you just feel better, don't you? You kind of feel more in flow,
Yeah.
you feel more energized, you feel more passionate, you're just good. And then you're frankly more good to be around, you're better, right? Whereas if you're doing the work where you're suffering and you're a bit depressed and bored, you're not really inspiring anybody. So there's every chance, even if your life path appears to be a strange thing or an unconventional thing or a thing that you couldn't obviously get money for, or you're not sure how it will work, right? You maybe have some dream or some vision, or you're not sure about your painting or whatever. Don't underestimate the fact that anything that a human does when they're more aligned and congruent and vital is kind of going into the world in a different way. And the world does tend to respond. Now, I want to be very clear. There's nothing on this podcast where we say, do what you love and the money will come. And I'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about no. But we do say, do what you love and you will continue to be resourced to carry on doing what you love. And sometimes that will be money flow, and it can be. And sometimes it might not be money flow, but you'll still get help and support and encouragement. And you'll feel bloody good anyway, because you're doing what you want to do. Okay. So you may or may not struggle with bills because money may or may not come, but anything you do from a life path point of view, you're putting something out into the world that is automatically more attractive to people. And therefore, very often people do want to respond with money and also without. And I think we all have examples of that. You know, the difference between going into a shop and feeling like it's just a shop and the people here don't really care, and, you know, it's run by some faceless corporation, and, you know, and going into a shop and somehow feeling like the whole place is just like, I don't know, lovely, creative, amazing. The people who work there are really into whatever they do. You want to support that shop, even if there's nothing in it you're ready to buy just then.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, of course. Whenever we went into little villages in the New Forest, and then, you know, you've got the fudge and the ice creams, and you're on holiday, but there is this genuine sense of it's just nice to buy from a little village shop than it is to go into a Morrison's.
Right.
Like,
Right.
just the way it
And
is.
we all buy stuff from Amazon, but none of us feel good about it. Or I won't say we all, many people do. So don't underestimate that for anyone listening. If you are interested in making money from your life path, number one, get out of your own way and charge for it and feel confident. And number two, don't underestimate, if you're really following your passion, you are sending something different into the field. Now let's talk for a few minutes about why the answer is no. What comes back from the field, from society, from the bigger picture, when we embark on our life path, will help us continue on our life path, because life wants people to follow their path. But life includes many things, and sometimes money will come back and sometimes it won't, right? And a big mistake that people make when they embark on their life path can be, if I don't get lots of money back, it's a sign I'm not on my life path, right? Or I'm failing, or I'm not doing the right thing.
Right.
It's this sort of naive belief that if I do what I love, the money will flow. And then what sometimes happens, sometimes the money flows. Super, great. You know, if your life path is to be a doctor, you're going to have money flow. If your life path is to create a novel, maybe money will flow. Probably it won't, right? If you're a lecturer at a mosque and you show up in the right way at the right time, money can flow. But if you're a Buddhist teacher, it probably won't, right? It's just the way it is. So sometimes money will come and sometimes it won't, but you'll still feel good and encouraged and supported and resourced in other ways. You look like you have a question.
Yeah. And that should not be the barometer by which you judge the success of your endeavor on your
Exactly.
life path.
Exactly. I mean, it might be a pain in the arse if you're
Yeah.
not getting money, and it might challenge you, and you might have to figure out ways
Yeah.
to pay your bills that are unusual. But it doesn't mean you won't be able to do that. And what it definitely doesn't mean is you've made the wrong decision. So that's a trap to look out for. Now, there's two things to say about that. You're right, you shouldn't use that as the criteria. Criteria that we use is, do I feel alive when I'm doing this? And if you do, my suggestion is keep doing it. You're going to suffer either way. As we said, you're going to suffer by staying in a job that's meaningless to you, but you may be able to pay your bills more easily. And you might suffer following your life path because you might feel good and inspired, but a bit scared about paying bills, or you might have to humble yourself and ask for money or do other things. So there's nothing fantastical about this. But you get to choose your suffering in life. As one great Jungian analyst said, you get to choose basically depression or anxiety, right?
Yeah.
In other words, depression of staying in something that's meaningless and you don't want, but it's sort of comfortable, or the fear of really following what brings you alive, but having to face challenges. I'll say one more thing on this because I'm conscious of your time, and then I'll shut. We've talked about this before on the podcast. It's very helpful if I'm going to embark on my life path, in order to not worry that I'm on the wrong path if money's not coming. I'm just challenged and it's difficult and I might suffer, but at least I get to choose and wake up every day feeling I'm on my path. It's very helpful to remember that the entire global economic money system is insane. It's confused, right? If you're a bomb manufacturer right now, you're doing really, really well. If you've got shares in munitions factories or bombs or a whole load of other stuff that's really not great, you're doing very well. If you want to sell drugs, until you get caught, you could make loads of money. The point is, money flows not really according to what's a life path for someone, okay? Because we have a confused economy and because we're all unconscious. So if I'm on my life path, money might flow towards what I do, and that's great and that's, precious and wonderful, but it might not, because we live in a world where the money flow is very distorted and a lot of money goes to really shit things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the thing you're doing is shit. It just means the world is not quite there yet already to flow
Mm.
money in your direction. You will still be resourced to keep doing it. And here's the thing, the bigger picture, the more people who slowly wake up and try and trust this logic of the life path, each time someone does it, it means a little bit more money will flow in the directions of what serves life. Each time
Yeah.
someone unhooks himself from the old money story. So what Peter Koenig, founder of this work, says is eventually, when humans have all woken up, money will
Yeah.
totally flow towards supporting everyone's life path. But that might take a while. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, we should do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, talking bombs, I feel like you just dropped a bomb there when you presented that scenario of how things are just totally skewed,
Yeah.
and which we know, but it also comes back to this idea that you've got to decouple from the number, right?
Yeah.
Because, in so many aspects of life, we've talked about this before, the number going up means that all is good and it's a success and all of those sort of positive things. When the
Yeah.
number goes down, the opposite. And it's actually, well, we've got to decouple from that relationship. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for failure, for misery, because we've got that constant attachment to the number or the money flowing being the validating factor, which is just so not true, as you just pointed out, with what's going on in the world at the moment. And I think it's just so important, this message of just everyone taking those steps that they can
Well, as
to
many
awaken.
people as are able, because lots of people don't feel able.
Yeah.
And again, there's an inner and outer dimension. They'll say they don't feel able because of money and reality and bills. And there is some truth in that. There's a relative truth. But deep down, they're not able because they're not able right now. But anyone listening to this, by definition, if you're still listening at the end of this podcast, you are able, with and without money. You are able to really take at least a step in the direction of your life path and face whatever suffering and challenge that brings you, but also welcome all the vitality, energy, passion, and resource and coming to you that will also be there. And sometimes that will be money, and sometimes for a time it won't. But yeah, that's a deeper picture of what's going on.
I think that's a great place to wrap up for this week. And thank you as ever, Tim. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Shabbat. See you soon, and enjoy the last day of Ramadan.
Cheers. Bye bye.